All right, welcome everybody. Welcome to this lunchtime edition of the DC Scrum User Group. As always, we are here to connect, share, and learn about all things Agile and Scrum. I'm Fadi Stefan, and I will be your host for this afternoon. I'm going to make two quick announcements before we get started. First off, we'd like to thank our sponsors, Excella and Kaizenko. If you are looking for training or coaching support, please reach out to me and I'll see how we can best support you and help you out. Second thing is our regularly scheduled event is going to be next Monday, all right? On the 14th, we're gonna have Anu right here present a coaching technique on self-reflection, self-care, and inner gratitude. So it's going to be on the 14th at 5:30. Please sign up and hope we can see you again on Monday. For today, the way things are going to go today is we are going to have an overview of what I think are the top 11 most important updates in the Scrum Guide. We are going to then go into breakout discussions so you can discuss with your fellow participants on the updates that you think are most significant to you and will have the biggest impact. And then we're going to come back and have a debrief. All right, so let's get started. First, to give you a bit of context. Scrum was first presented in 1995. The Scrum Guide was not written till much later in about 2010. And since then, every 2 years or so, there is an update to the Scrum Guide by Ken Schwaber and Jeff Sutherland, the co-creators of Scrum, and they update the guide based on community feedback. And what we're going to talk about today are the top 11 changes in the guide based on, obviously, my perspective. Let's get started. The first thing is Scrum is a minimally sufficient framework, right? This is not new. Scrum is a framework and not a definitive method, meaning it's simple, it's lightweight, and it's not overly prescriptive, right? The 2020 Scrum Guide emphasizes this by specifically saying it is purposely incomplete. Many people forget this fact and start asking, what should I do in this situation? What should I do in this situation? And are looking for something very, very prescriptive. You're not going to find that in the guide. What the guide says is use the framework, use Scrum, use empiricism to figure out what works best for you, right? Try it out, add whatever processes and techniques work for you in your context, in your environment, with your teams, with your organizations, while staying true to the Agile values and principles and the spirit of Scrum. Next up, one Scrum team, all right? It's just one Scrum team. Previous Scrum Guides talked about a Scrum team consisting of a product owner, a Scrum Master, and a Scrum development team. This terminology was a bit awkward, having a Scrum development team within the outer Scrum team, and it caused many to incorrectly confuse the Scrum team with just the Scrum development team. So they would call the Scrum development team as the Scrum team, and then have the product owner and the Scrum Master outside of the team. And this created an us versus them type of environment, where the developers felt they were working for the product owner as opposed to collaborating with the product owner, right? So to address this, the 2020 Scrum Guide talks about one Scrum team, and it changed the Scrum development team to just developers. And the word developers here doesn't mean programmers or coders. It means anybody involved in the development of a product, right? Whatever your skill set is. If you're involved in product development, you are called a developer. So now it's one Scrum team with a product owner, a Scrum Master, and developers all working together as one team. And they have 3 accountabilities, right? The Scrum development team has the accountability for delivering a quality product increment. The product owner has the accountability for ensuring that this product increment is the most valuable thing the team could have worked on. And the Scrum Master has the accountability of team effectiveness, all right? Team effectiveness. One Scrum team, 3 accountabilities. Next, we want to talk about product definition. Scrum has always been about creating and managing complex products. However, the term product was never defined in the Scrum Guide. In the 2020 update, the product is defined as a vehicle of delivering value. It has clear boundaries, known stakeholders, well-defined users or customers. Right? The product can be a service, a physical product, or something more abstract. I don't have much more to say about this. I'm just bringing it in as an FYI that now in the Scrum Guide, they've defined what a product is. Next, we want to talk about the product goal. This is new, all right? In previous Scrum Guides, there was a vision and teams were supposed to work towards that vision. That didn't quite happen that way. Many teams ended up working on various initiatives without making forward progress towards an overall objective. To address this, the 2020 guide introduces the concept of a product goal, right? So the product backlog contains a goal, and the product backlog emerges with product backlog items that help fulfill that goal, all right? So one goal goes into the product backlog, and everything the team is working on is about delivering on that goal, which is defining a future state or a future vision. This hopefully will have everybody working together, and getting each product increment that gets delivered gets us a step closer to achieving that particular product goal. So with each product increment, we move one step closer to delivering on our product goal. Next, we're going to talk about the sprint goal. So unlike the product goal, the sprint goal was always there. However, many teams kind of glossed over the sprint goal and never created one in sprint planning. And what ended up happening is the developers were working on, in their own kind of little silos, on things that were not really connected to each other, right? So to help address this, the 2020 Scrum Guide elevates the sprint goal and emphasizes it. Like we have a product goal that goes in the product backlog, we also have a sprint goal that goes in the sprint backlog, right? And the idea is that it's one goal and everybody on the team is working together collaboratively to deliver on that sprint goal, which gets us closer to our product goal. All right. The sprint planning meeting has been updated. Previously, the sprint goal was part of the what topic in sprint planning, but because it was kind of glossed over, that has been moved up to its own topic. So sprint planning is now 3 topics. The first topic is about the why, right? Why what we're working on is valuable to our stakeholders, all right? What's the goal, right? The second part is about the what. What in the product backlog will help us accomplish this goal, will help us accomplish this value to our stakeholders. And the third item is about the how. The third topic is about the how, which is how are we going to organize ourselves as a team to deliver on this sprint goal. All right, so 3 topics: the why, the what, and the how in sprint planning to further emphasize the focus on the sprint goal. Definition of done, like the sprint goal, not new, but also glossed over, all right? So the 2020 Scrum Guide elevates the definition of done as well. We have a product goal that goes in the product backlog. We have a sprint goal that goes in the sprint backlog. And we have a definition of done that goes in the product increments. And the product increment is delivered at a level of quality as defined in the definition of done. All right, so the definition of done helps us ensure the quality level of our product increment. It is different than the acceptance criteria. Many people confuse definition of done with acceptance criteria. The definition of done is about quality. The acceptance criteria is about the requirements. All right. The sprint review. Let's talk about the sprint review being decoupled from the product increment. All right. The end of every sprint, we have a product increment. Right? The product increment is of high enough quality to be usable, right? We typically want to use it. We want to be able to ship it. And many teams struggle with that concept. And many teams end up working several sprints and then having a product increment that is of high quality or working software that is ready to be shipped. Right, to help kind of, the reasons for this are, varied. It might be a lack of agile engineering practices, and it might be a lack of product backlog refinement, where we're breaking down things into very thinly sliced, vertical sliced features of end-to-end functionality. So to help, address this, the 2020 guide highlights that yes, you need a product increment at the end of the sprint, but you don't need to wait till the end of the sprint to deliver this product increment. You can deliver it throughout the sprint. So hopefully this will help people kind of break things up even smaller and avoid working on large items throughout the entire sprint, but work on many smaller items throughout the sprint instead. All right. This also fits very nicely with the concept of continuous deployment and continuous delivery. Sticking with the sprint review, there's been a clarification that the sprint review is a working session, right? So the sprint review was always about receiving feedback, right? It was always about getting feedback about the product and then deciding what we're going to do next. However, many teams out there refer to the sprint review as a demo and just do kind of a one-way presentation from the developers to the product owner with very little stakeholder involvement. And other teams treat it kind of as a gate review to releasing value. So the 2020 Scrum Guide clarifies this and highlights that the sprint review is a working session. It's a collaborative working session with stakeholders, right? The Scrum team working with stakeholders, going to inspect the product increment. And then based on feedback, they will adapt the product backlog to ensure that they're working on the next most valuable thing possible. And they've specifically highlighted that the sprint review is never to be considered a gate for releasing value. Next up, we're going to talk about self-managing teams. Previous guides referred to the Scrum development team as a self-organizing team. The 2020 Scrum Guide changed that to self-managing teams. So let's talk about the difference. A self-organizing team is a team that determines who's going to do the work and how they're going to do it, right? So we used to talk about a Scrum development team being empowered to determine how they're going to do the work, what are all the tasks that they need to do, and then who is going to do it, meaning, how they're going to organize themselves and who's going to work on what to deliver on the sprint goal. Since there's a focus in the 2020 guide on the one Scrum team that includes the product owner, now the Scrum team is not only determining how things are going to be done and who's going to work on what, but they're also determining what they're going to work on. Because the product owner is part of the team, and the product owner determines, the order of the product backlog and what it's going to contain. right? So a better description for the Scrum team is a self-managing team that determines what the team's going to work on, when they're going to work on it, and how they're going to work on it, as opposed to what was previously referred to as a self-organizing team, which was just about the when and the how. A word on scaling. The 2020 Scrum Guide kind of has a one sentence that better describes how we would scale within Scrum. Previous guides talked about when you have multiple teams all working on one product, they should all be working off of one product backlog, right? However, many teams out there, when they scale, they end up creating multiple product backlogs and multiple product owners. Right? This creates a lack of coordination. There's kind of finger pointing going on between the different product owners. They're all trying to locally optimize their individual product backlogs, and kind of they lose view of the larger picture. There's kind of the responsibilities are muddied and become unclear. So to address this and fix this issue with scaling, the 2020 Scrum Guide goes a step further and highlights that it's not just one product backlog, but it's also one product owner and one product goal, right? So if you have multiple teams working on the same product, they should have one product owner, they should have one product goal, and they should be working off of one product backlog. A clarification on scaling. Finally, we're going to talk about the Scrum Master as a true leader, right? Previous guides talked about the Scrum Master as a servant leader. Here we're talking about the Scrum Master as a true leader. All the updates I've talked about so far have been kind of a move in the right direction to try and correct a lot of misunderstandings or a lot of anti-patterns that were going on in Scrum. This one is in the same spirit. However, I'm not so happy with the term true leader, right? The concept of servant leadership was coined back in the 70s, and there's been a lot of publications, a lot of literature about the topic of servant leadership over the past 30, 40 years or so. However, many organizations still don't quite understand this concept and end up treating a Scrum Master as just an administrator or a note taker or a facilitator without any of the leadership responsibilities or the leadership experience that they typically need. So a Scrum Master is the team's or the organization's change agent. They're the ones leading Scrum adoption. They're the ones working with the stakeholders and teaching them about empiricism. They are the ones removing any impediments within the organization. They are the ones ensuring that the Scrum team is moving in the right direction and delivering a high quality, high value product. They are the ones responsible for continuous improvements, right? So it is a leadership role and requires leadership capabilities. To help fix that, the 2020 Scrum Guide dropped the term servant leader and replaced it with a true leader, right? So the Scrum Master is a true leader that serves the organization and the Scrum team, and they are the ones accountable for the overall Scrum team's effectiveness, right? So hopefully this change in terminology will bring back the focus on what a Scrum Master truly does, and avoids these anti-patterns of a Scrum Master just being an admin or a note taker and so forth. All right, so what else? What else? Many people will say, oh, the 3 questions in the daily Scrum have been dropped. I'd like to kind of include that as part of the minimally sufficient framework, right? The Scrum Guide has dropped from 18 pages down to 13 because they've removed a lot of the language that was seen as overly prescriptive, right? A lot of this language that was seen as overly prescriptive has been removed, and that includes, the recommendation on how to run a daily Scrum. That's been kind of removed, along with a bunch of other things. For those of you that are doing Scrum properly, or for those of you that are succeeding with Scrum, these changes that I've highlighted will have little impact. For those of you that are struggling, hopefully the 2020 Scrum Guide will help identify some anti-patterns that you might be applying and might help you kind of correct them and move in the right direction so you can get the most benefits out of Scrum and deliver the most value to your organization. And with that, that is all I have to say about the updates. Here's my contact info if you need to reach me. We are going to now move into the group discussion section of the presentation. I'm going to go into breakout sessions, and we'll have discussions about any one of these topics that you want to go deeper on within the participants from the DC Scrum user group. All right, so let me kind of guide you through how that's going to work out.